I think Maxwell is one of, if not the best character in the game. He has resource gathering abilities stronger than anyone else in the form of shadow workers, as well as great boss killing abilities courtesy of shadow duelists, which get stronger depending on what you have equipped. These duelists can take on even the strongest of bosses, although minions also reduce maximum sanity while they're alive. You can have up to 6 at a time, but having all of them makes you insane. The spells also cost sanity. On top of that, he has a large passive sanity gain, extra storage in the form of Magician's Top Hat, and some extra spells. And as if that's not enough, he can also use all of Wickerbottom's books. This all sounds great, but if it's so powerful then it must come at a heavy price, right? But no. Each spell and minion costs you a pathetic 1/5 of a nightmare fuel. Minions of the highest quality, dirt cheap, and always available. However, there's always people insisting that the character's only downside of having low health at 75 instead of the usual 150 is enough to warrant his sheer power and versatility. It is because of that idea that I'll be playing Maxwell, but using a mod to lower his maximum health all the way down to just 15, a fifth of what he usually has. Playing with such low health definitely wasn't all smooth sailing, but even his only downside being taken to the absolute extreme isn't enough to stop him from being incredibly powerful. Upon starting, I immediately found the shadow pieces set piece, already a good start. Then I found the mosaic where I spawned some minions to dig graves. This granted me some gems, trinkets, a gear, and not one, but 2 life-giving amulets. Normally in runs like this, a life-giving amulet is something you pay no attention to, but since even a small error can be fatal with 15 health, I'm happy to save them. As it currently stands, most creatures are capable of killing me in a single hit, so I'll be avoiding combat until I have some armor. I continued gathering resources, utilizing the codex. I then found a touchstone, and this is where I adjusted my route. Normally, I'd look for pig houses before getting a beefalo, but now I have pigskin, and all I need is some boards. There was a large savanna near the portal, so I was certain I could find beefalo there. I backtracked a bit to get some wood, and made my alchemy engine. Shortly after, I found the beefalo I had been looking for and saddled one on day 2. I had also of course made a football helmet. With this, I can survive 2 hits from something like a spider, but something stronger like a terrorbeak can kill me in 2 attacks. It's not an awful lot of wiggle room, but it's enough. Now is the time to explore. I killed a koalefant for pearl, ate a lot of green caps for nightmare fuel, and gathered other resources along the way. I also found a breezy vest, so I guess I killed the koalefant for nothing. By day 8, I had found everything and chose to make my base in a central location, which had a good wormhole nearby. I had already made a shadow manipulator, since it is very important for Maxwell. With it, you can make dark swords and night armor, both of which buff duelists. I also used the top hat, reclaimed from the Prestidigitator, to make the Magician's Top Hat, which also buffs duelists, in addition to giving 12 inventory slots. The aforementioned wormhole takes you to a forest, where I went to summon a tree guard for more living logs. With Maxwell's very powerful gathering abilities, this took just a few minutes. The next thing I did was move the shadow pieces. I'll only be fighting them on day 21, so I have plenty of time, but I'd rather do it now to get more domestication on my beefalo before doing something dangerous. The dangerous thing in question is the ruins, which I was now prepared for. I used a cave entrance near my base, which quickly led me to the mud biome and shortly found the ruins. You may notice, I only have 11 nightmare fuel, a serviceable amount but nowhere near enough for Maxwell. To fix this, I gathered some monkeys, caged them, and used Shadow Sneak. Shadow Sneak turns some creatures into their shadow variant, and guarantees them to drop nightmare fuel. After killing them, I had gained 13. This is much faster than killing nightmares. I was lucky enough to find the labyrinth immediately, and after being reminded how much easier it is to navigate as Wartox, I found the Guardian. Guardian is not a difficult fight whatsoever, and so of course Maxwell is capable of making minced meat out of it. Maxwell breaks the routine of making Guardian run into pillars for stuns, and instead can very easily brute force the boss simply by spawning enough minions. And you may be thinking, that sounds pretty wasteful. Brute forcing things is not an efficient way to spend resources. To which I say, good thinking. However, Maxwell's minions are so absurdly cheap that he can get away with it. The fight cost about 3 nightmare fuel. The fight rewarded me with all the resources I was missing, so I quickly found a pseudoscience station, repaired it, and crafted all that I needed, including a mag, 2 Starcaller staffs, a deconstruction staff, a pick/axe, and 2 Thulosite crowns. I tried to kill more monkeys, but my beefalo got low on health, so I retreated. Losing my beefalo is a risk far too huge. Before leaving the ruins, I looked for the land pointing towards the atrium. I talked about this in my Wartox run, and since then I learned that it's actually called the Atrium Bridge. I found it quickly, and you could even see the atrium. On my way out, I again tried to get some more nightmare fuel, which I got a bit of. Although I was done with the ruins, I still had some things to do in the caves. I fortunately already found Toadstool on my way to the ruins, but I had to gather fossils. I found some cave spider dens and used the duelists, workers, and Shadow Sneak to help with the gathering. Shadow Sneak has another effect of scaring creatures, which immensely helps dealing with spitter spiders. I was still yet to find the nightmare werepig, so I did that before leaving the caves. It was only day 14. I still had plenty of time until Shadow Pieces, and I directed this time towards Pearl. I gathered some of the resources I'll need and set sail for Lunar. I had already gotten a bottle out of the water while exploring, so I knew where she was. Lunar appeared to be close to her, so I went there first. Here I assembled the first lunar altar and then went to Pearl. I did the few quests I could currently accomplish and then set sail to find salt. Last run I used a method of looking near the shore, which worked well, so I did the same thing again and found it almost immediately. It's always a huge relief to get this out of the way. I got the 10 cookie cutter shells needed for Pearl and then returned to land. I spent the next couple days preparing for Fuel Lever. This included gathering cactus for sanity and making a bat as my choice of healing. I'm prioritizing Fuel Lever so much because his loot makes Maxwell very strong, so all bosses will be a breeze afterwards. Day 20 was the last one before winter. In this time I went to a triple McTusk biome to get a tusk. While I was waiting for daybreak, I made my Moonstone defense since it was right next to it. The second McTusk I killed got me a tusk. There were still more I could kill to try to get a tam, but it isn't very useful in Maxwell, so I left it. I didn't do very much rest of the day. I was just waiting for Shadow Pieces. Now, Shadow Pieces is a boss that demanded some adjustment on my behalf, courtesy of the low health. While wearing knight armor, I am too slow. While wearing a mag, I am too fragile. The solution of course is beefalo and minions. Minions however are a bit cumbersome against the AoE of the bishop and the rook, so this is how I did it. First I killed the bishop. 90% of the time, you'd want to get the knight first, but in this scenario the bishop is definitely the bigger threat. Afterwards, I let my minions kill the knight, while I distracted the rook. But didn't I just say that the rook's AoE is tough? Why am I not doing the knight last? The reason is that the tier 3 knight is absurdly powerful and I do not want to mess with that. In phase 3, the rook is pretty good at killing minions, but with how cheap they are, it really doesn't matter much. Defeating the boss of course rewards the Shadow Atrium, but I will also be putting the armor and the dark sword to good use. They also drop a respectable amount of nightmare fuel. I finalized preparations and went into the caves. I realized that I have left the ancient key at the Guardian, so I made a little detour to get it and then crafted the Lazy Explorer. I made another mistake. I forgot to bring an umbrella. Winter rain is pretty common in the caves, and I wanted to use an umbrella and a football helmet to achieve wetness protection and dry off. Rain makes you lose sanity and drop wet items, which sounds terrible for Fuel Weaver, but I was actually very confident, so instead of going back I continued onwards. You might think it's crazy to do this fight while wet, and I would have thought the same until I was put in this situation and realized it's not that bad. For equipment, I have some knight armor and crowns, dark swords, a bat, mag, nightmare amulet, lazy explorer, and cooked cactus. Phase 1 is very easy. I just kept spawning more and more minions while avoiding combat. When Phase 2 started, I actually had him in a pretty bad position, but just used Shadow Prison a couple times and problem solved. Then of course you take care of the unseen hands, spawn more minions, and do damage. I only spawned 4 minions. You can go for 5, but if there's a way for me to die here, it's going to be because of insanity. As such, I chose to play a bit safer and give up some DPS. Second cycle, I moved him to the proper location and caged. Low health doesn't matter in this fight because Night Armor is extremely potent, and I just need to occasionally use my Bat. The Bat is a somewhat obscure weapon that heals you when you use it, and I found it to be the perfect source of healing in this scenario. After a bit, Fuel Weaver dies. This was a fight I was very scared of initially, but after seeing Meatgood do this method, I learned how much of a joke even the big bad Fuel Weaver is as Maxwell. I ended up not even using half the armor I made. That being said, Meatgood did it even cheaper, for the simple reason that he's just better at the game than me. I was back at base by day 27. At this point, the run seems pretty slow. I had only fought 3 bosses. Well, the idea is that I delay bosses until after I defeat the Fuel Weaver, and instead direct my energy towards exploration and pearl quests. But now that I have the Fuel Weaver equipment, bosses are going to start dropping like flies. I also turned on a mod to remove the insanity filter, because I'll be wearing the bone helm a lot and I want the video to be watchable. I started looking for Klaus in the mosaic and spent the night fighting the twins. Allow me to explain how the fight goes. Basically, first I summon minions, then I cage the boss, and then I continue spamming those 2 abilities. I also attack the boss whenever I'm not casting spells, since attacking something makes your minions attack faster. I killed one of them on the first night, and started taking on the other. When morning came, I continued looking for Klaus, but only found his deer. When night came again, I had foolishly forgotten about the twins until the night was almost over. I then clumsily tried to summon them before it was too late, and ended up dying to a tallbird. Well, this is the type of situation where 15 health becomes a problem. I was carrying my life-giving amulet and started the fight, but there was too little left of the night to finish it. I continued looking for Klaus in the deciduous biome and found it right before night, so I summoned the last twin who died immediately. Guess it was very close the other night. Now I have the key and located the sack, but I'm actually not ready to fight him yet. First, I must fight the Bee Queen. Allow me to explain how the fight goes. Basically, first I summon minions, then I cage the boss, and then I continue spamming these 2 abilities. It also helps to keep her separate from her minions. Funnily, a Houndwave and a Deerclops both showed up during the fight, but were both brushed off by Maxwell's sheer strength. Bee Queen, the Hounds, and Deerclops cost about 12 nightmare fuel. Now it was day 31, so I had to complete the Moonstorm event. I have already built the defense, so I just added some fossils recycled from Fuel Weaver. I also ended up using Shadow Prison a couple times. I don't think I had to, but it made me feel more comfortable knowing with 100% certainty that it won't fail. Dragonfly was on my way from the Moonstone back to base, so I stopped by to kill the boss. Allow me to explain how the fight goes. Basically, first I summon minions, then I cage the boss, and then I continue spamming those 2 abilities. Dragonfly is entirely helpless. The fight cost about 6 nightmare fuel. Now I was ready to fight Klaus. The reason I wasn't ready earlier is because of the ice and fire attacks. These attacks cause you to freeze and overheat respectively, which bypasses armor and the beefalo, and so I wanted jelly beans to heal with. In this fight, you can't spawn minions willy-nilly, since they can end up killing the deer in Raging Claws. To prevent that, you need to spawn your minions out of range of the boss, and then attack Klaus to direct their aggro. The fight cost about 3 nightmare fuel. The only helpful thing from Klaus is a Malbatross bill. I had already found salt, so this won't be immensely helpful, but it's still an upgrade. I gathered some resources for Pearl and made another trip to her island, where I gave her the Breezy Vest among a few other things. Now I was prepared to go into the caves again, to kill the 2 remaining bosses, as well as complete the archives. I deconstructed the moon collar for the opal, and made a fire staff before hammering the shadow manipulator. I will no longer need it, and I want to reclaim some of the spent resources. First stop was Nightmare Werepig. Allow me to explain how the fight goes. Basically, first I summon minions, then I cage the boss, and then I continue spamming those 2 abilities. The fight cost about 6 nightmare fuel. I did not get him to smash the pillars, since I won't be making anything with Dreadstone. However, pure horror can be used to fuel the codex, which makes the fight a net profit overall. Next comes Toadstool. Now, Toadstool isn't a boss you can so easily defeat with just spamming spells. This is because you need to deal with his trees, which grant him immense damage reduction. Shadow workers aren't actually good at dealing with them, since there are just so many trees to chop, and they spend a lot of time panicking due to the giant frog and explosive mushrooms near them. So that means I'll be doing the usual burn trees and move to various pawns method, but of course I'll be spawning duelists. The duelists are immune to spore clouds, but actually make the fight quite cumbersome. It is difficult to move Toadstool when there are so many things drawing his aggro. That being said, they are still worth it because they deal so much damage. Needing to burn trees also means I can't be on my beefalo for the fight, which makes it more dangerous but allowed me to do more damage myself. I used the living logs from the shadow manipulator and the moon collar to make dark swords. Dark swords don't buff minions as much as the Thurible, but it's still more DPS overall. I died again during the fight after getting hit by a piece of flint, but I still had my second life-giving amulet, so it's fine. When Toadstool died, I collected the reward, which is not his drops, but instead nightmare fuel. Toadstool's AoE attacks are actually capable of killing nightmares, and since I've been wearing the bone helm, there were a lot of nightmares. I collected an entire stack of nightmare fuel. I then went to the archives, quickly completed the puzzle to get the astral detector, crafted it, and left afterwards. Now I just need to defeat the Crab King and Celestial Champion to finish the run. I made a farm to get the potato I need for the astragals, and gathered the last of the resources for Pearl. On her island, I killed the lure plant, finished upgrading her house, gave her an umbrella, planted flowers, fertilized bushes, and finally collected the trash. I finished her quests and got her Pearl. Back on the mainland, I found and moved the 2 pieces of the second altar. Now I have to do Crab King. Maxwell's minions aren't very good against him, so I just chose to use bees instead. Well, I have nothing new to say about this boss. As I said last time, I really don't like him. Wow, unpopular opinion, I know. So, let us rejoice in bees. I then took all the altars to the lunar island and assembled them, starting the Moonstorm. I had 2 potatoes, but they weren't done growing yet, so I collected my first Restrained Static without them. It didn't occur to me at the time, but now I realize that the mod I was using to remove the Insanity filter also removed the filter of the storm. So, oops. This event is actually very easy as Maxwell. You just spawn some duelists to take care of the birds. By this time my potatoes grew, so I had struggles for the following 2 events. Now I had everything to summon the Celestial Champion, except of course, look who didn't show up again! In my last run, I said the Celestial Orb is guaranteed to spawn after day 50, but since then I learned that its spawning mechanic is a bit more complicated than that. I won't get into it, but all that matters is that just like in my previous run, it didn't show up yet again. I thoroughly searched the meteor field and even ran a command to see if it has spawned, and it did not. I just spawned it in because there's nothing I can do to get it otherwise. I hate having to do this, but I'm not going to have my run slowed down by something I cannot help. Also, the official dsdspeedrun.com allows for the use of mods to remove the requirement of the Celestial Orb to spawn Celestial Champion, so maybe I should have that mod on in the first place. On the lunar island, I built the Incomplete Experiment, starting the Celestial Champion fight. Allow me to explain how the fight goes. Basically, first I summon minions, then I cage the boss, and then I continue spamming those two abilities. However, in Phase 2, I do the exact same thing. Phase 3, on the other hand, also required absolutely no extra effort. You expected more from the final boss? No. Maxwell just needs 12 nightmare fuel. My beefalo did end up dying, but that's not changing the outcome, and as such, I had finished the run. Now, you may be thinking, well, that didn't even look challenging. Having low health didn't even matter most of the time because you just used Night Armor or a Beefalo. And you would be absolutely correct. Overcoming the downside is just that easy. The purpose of this video is, well, firstly to be a boss rush, and secondly to demonstrate just how insignificant of a downside low health is. Sure, I did die twice, but this is with 15 maximum health. Maxwell's usual of 75 is gigantic in comparison, although it's truly made for a surprisingly enjoyable experience. When you're prepared with Night Armor or a Beefalo, then the downside is almost entirely undermined, because Maxwell doesn't even need to get his hands dirty to kill a boss, and even then he does it very cheap. What made low health interesting is how it can sneak up on you at any moment. Damage you could previously brush off could now be lethal. Let's talk a little more about the character. Pre-Fuel Weaver Maxwell is still very strong, possessing incredible gathering abilities as well as very impressive combat skills. But you didn't see an awful lot of Maxwell fighting bosses before the Fuel Weaver. Of course, I highly prioritized killing the boss because it unlocks Maxwell's highest potential, at which point I would argue he crosses over into truly overpowered territory. Every boss can very easily be steamrolled, requiring pretty minimal effort from the player, and at what cost? A handful of nightmare fuel. Fast, cheap, and easy. Of course, there's also his very quick gathering, and some other tools, all of which make Maxwell an all-around very strong character with plenty of quality of life perks. Don't worry though, he only has 75 health, so he is definitely, beyond a shadow of a doubt, a balanced character.